Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later in the programme I'll be talking to Chris Patten, Hong Kong's last governor, 10 years after the handover back to China. Plus the children's author, most borrowed from libraries all over the world, Jacqueline Wilson. But first, the Middle East. Britain's outgoing Prime Minister, Tony Blair, has this week taken up a new post as envoy to the Middle East on behalf of the so-called Quartet, the UN, US, EU and Russia. Just as the Prime Minister stepped down from the UK Premiership, so too did the man who has been Mr Blair's own envoy to the region for the last 9 years, Lord Levy. And I'm delighted to say he's with us right now. Michael, welcome.
Sir David, delighted to be here.
Looking back over the 9 years that you've spent in this role, what's been the most important development, and was it positive or negative?
I think it's been a very difficult period. In Israel, after the Rabin assassination, you had Perez taking over, then Netanyahu, and then after that Barak, and then Sharon, and now Olmert. A series of prime ministers. The late Arafat passed away, and Abu Mazen now is the president of the Palestinian Authority. After the great hopes in the Rabin era and the great effort that President Clinton made during his last period of office, we have really seen a very, very difficult situation. There were some positive signs during this period. Late Arafat appointed the very first ever Palestinian Prime Minister, which we thought could be an arena for progress. This was in a letter given to me on behalf of then Prime Minister Blair. There was some positive signs in Damascus when I was going back and forth with the late President Assad, and sadly that did not come to fruition. But it has been a very difficult period. We are now in a situation that needs some serious action, but patience is going to be the key word. And I'm delighted that Tony Blair has taken on this new role, as you said, as the envoy for the Quartet, which you've described, the States, Russia, the EU and the UN. And I really believe that he will give this the diligence and the time that he gave to the Northern Ireland process.
Well, so that's an interesting one to, yes, compare it with. Well, at that point, dealing with the key problem, or one of the key problems he faces, and over the last 9 years you faced too, is to reassure people that he's not impossibly biased in favour of Israel. And when we talked to him in the first programme, in fact, of this series, he addressed that very specifically. Let's take a look at that and then see how you dealt with that too. Here it is. One of the problems there, though, is the perception that you and America are not unbiased in this situation.
Absolutely.
Everyone in the Arab world thinks that you're on the side of Israel, and somehow that's got to be dispelled.
Yeah, but you know what would help dispel it is people would understand that I am a strong supporter of Israel. I believe that Israel should have the right to exist, right? But I also believe that we need a Palestinian state, an independent, viable, democratic Palestinian state living alongside Israel. Now, the only way you're going to get there is not if we suddenly start distancing ourselves from Israel, because Israel's got to be part of this solution. The only way we're going to get there, as we tried to do here in respect of Northern Ireland, is to bring people together, to set out a common way forward and then work at it day in, day out until we get there. And the interesting thing about the Middle East at the moment, if you see King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia's initiative, for example, if you look at what other leaders in the region are talking about in Egypt and Jordan and so on, everybody wants the same thing now. Everybody wants that two-state solution.
Everyone wants that two-state solution. Now, how will he put... We've seen that Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, has welcomed his appointment, and Hamas has not. No particular surprise there. But how do you think he deals with the perceived problem that America and Britain are too pro-Israel for the Palestinians?
I think Tony Blair articulated the position, David, very well in the clip you just shown. he fervently believes in a two-state solution. He obviously understands Israel's security needs, and when people still talk about wiping Israel off the face of the map, this is not any way forward. Israel is a fact. Israel must be part of the Middle East fabric. It is a viable state, and it has to be recognized as such, and it has to have full security so that it can play its role not just in the region, but in the world. But he also fully understands, and certainly I do, that the Palestinian people must have their future and their way forward. And I believe that Abu Mazen, the new Prime Minister Salam Fayyad, will work with him. He has an understanding that all the Palestinians somehow have to work together. And he knows that one of his key tasks is to understand the internal conflicts within Palestinian society. It is no use being just supportive of one side and not the other. He has clearly stated that there must be a way forward for the Palestinian people, but that cannot be in any way that would harm Israel's security. There has to be a two-state solution, but it will take patience. It is no point in having a quick fix to this, just because President Bush is coming to the end of his term of office. A quick fix will not do. I hope Tony Blair's role and his desire to make this work will be well beyond President Bush's term of office as president.
And what about the Lebanon? It's so close, it's right there. Well, lots of the countries are close, but I mean, it obviously impinges on what's going to happen, doesn't it, between Israel and the Palestinians? The Lebanon is a wild card.
Absolutely, David. In the finality, all the countries in the region must be part of the future fabric of the Middle East. There is a peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. There is a peace agreement between Israel and Jordan. Lebanon is on the border. Syria is on the border. Ultimately, there must be peace agreements with these countries, as there needs to be a Palestinian state. But these are complex issues. One has to almost start here with a clean piece of paper and say, where do we go forward? What can Israel do to help? What can Palestinian society do to work out a way of the factions, the groups, the disparate groups, how are they going to work together? And then how can Lebanon come into the frame? And how can Syria come into the frame? And the Arab League need to play a crucial role. King Abdullah, as Tony Blair just said, of Saudi Arabia, the initiative that they've come forward through the Arab League, the whole of the Arab world needs to play its part in helping move this process forward.
And do we have a situation, Michael, at the moment where when we've got everyone agreeing to a two-state solution, because of what's going on in the West Bank and Gaza, do we have to look at a three-state solution?
Absolutely not. I think anyone that is looking at that, they are not thinking clearly. This is absolutely a two-state solution. Israel and the Palestinian people. The fact that there now is a breakdown of the NUG government after the Mecca deal, this doesn't mean there are three states. There are two peoples, the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. And it's very important that over a period of time, these things cannot be rushed. There are very open sore wounds at the moment with Fatah. Hamas have not yet done the things that they need to do in terms of recognition of Israel. But this is for the Palestinian people to resolve. In the same way, there were different groups who were at each other's throats in the island situation. You have that here. And Tony Blair, from his experience there, fully understands that. Any talk of a three-state solution is not in my opinion. You cannot have Fatah on the West Bank, Hamas in Gaza. It just cannot work. But these things will take time. At the moment, dealing with Fatah, helping with the authority, with Abu Mazen, with Salam Fayyad is very important. But understanding that there are 1.4 million people in Gaza, they cannot be neglected. There must be humanitarian aid, and gradually there must be a process of a healing of the situation within Palestinian society.
Michael, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate it. Thank you for that upsum and a view there. Thank you very much.
David, a pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to take a break. In a few moments later on, we're 10 years on from the colony's handover. I'll be talking to the last governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten. Do join me then.